The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hopefully everyone can hear me. If you can't hear me, just let us know down in the chat box. Good afternoon if you are in the Eastern Time Zone, or good morning depending on where you are. This is the first of what we hope are many great webinars with VBA Express. Today we have Dennis Taylor. It's an honor to have Dennis as our speaker. For those of you who don't know, Dennis has really been an Excel educator. He's really a master Excel educator. He's been doing it for a long time. He has over 50 different training courses on different Excel topics for various companies such as lynda.com. And he's also taught classes and seminars for companies like Apple. So Apple, Microsoft's competitor, has asked him for help with Excel. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to hand it over to Dennis in about a minute. But just to let you know, if you have any questions, if you have any problems, feel free to write them down in that chat box. There's also a questions box. If you have any questions during the show, you can ask them. If we see a lot of questions are building up, or people are saying, whoa, slow down, we'll take a breather and we'll stop and talk about that. So let us know in the chat box, in the question box. Without further ado, I'm going to switch the presentation over to Dennis.
All right. Thank you, Jordan, and hello, everyone. I'm going to be, you will be seeing momentarily my screen, I believe, a second or two. There's no question that there are many, many people using Excel these days, but there's also no question that many, many people are underutilizing Excel. Excel is filled with tons of shortcuts, and unfortunately, a lot of them are not so well known. And today we're going to be covering quite a few different ones, too. I want to start off with some so-called navigation techniques. That's probably not a term you use as you work with Excel, but just the whole idea of scoping out a workbook, figuring out what's in the workbook, how to quickly move back and forth between different worksheets, creating new worksheets, working to jump into different workbooks. In a certain sense, kind of basic, but on the other hand, some shortcuts I think you'll really be pleased with, particularly for moving up and down within worksheets as well, too. The workbook that I have open here has many sheets in it. You wouldn't necessarily know that, and I think one of the first things people do, if they're encountered with a workbook they have not seen before, or maybe it's one of theirs they haven't seen in a long, long time, you start clicking on the sheet tabs at the bottom of the screen, and not a bad idea, of course. But first order of business might be the arrows to the left of that. Those are called navigation arrows. I'm circling them down in the lower left corner here. Just do a right click on those, a right click, and you will get a vertical list of the sheet names. Now, in the current version, the most names you can see here is 16. So if there are more sheets, it'll say more sheets at the bottom. But think of this not only as a list of the sheet names, and the top-down order, by the way, does correspond with the left-to-right order that we see at the bottom. But think of it also perhaps like a table of contents. Maybe this is one of your old workbooks. You haven't seen one. Say, oh yeah, I remember this now. I've got that mixed name sheet out there. Just jump to that. Just click on it. So at any time when you're working with this workbook, you can, or any workbook of course, you can right-click the arrows and jump to the particular sheet that you want to go to. And of course, the more familiar you are with this, the easier this is. Now, there's also another alternative here too. When you look at the bottom of the screen, I'm circling the mouse here where the sheet names end, the scroll bar begins. You can put the mouse pointer right at that point and double click. That's likely to show you a few more sheets. But even here you can expand this even more. So at the bottom of the screen where the sheet names end and the scroll bar begins, if you put the mouse pointer right at that point, you'll see a double left-right arrow. You can now click and drag. Now it shortens the scroll bar, but most of the time that's not a concern. And so no matter how wide a worksheet is, the scroll bar always compensates and it adjusts. So it doesn't have to really be very wide. I've got one worksheet in here. It's got some scientific data in it, and it simply has many, many columns. But you see what the scroll bar is doing there. In other words, it adjusts to the size of it and so on. So we don't worry about that. But why not see more sheet names whenever possible? I'm going to jump back to the first sheet here. When we do switch sheets, I think most of us, most of the time, are probably going to click on a sheet because many times it is fast. You'll move over 2 sheets or 8 sheets or whatever.
but sometimes your hands are on the keyboard, and particularly if you had a workbook where each sheet tab is a different month, when you're on the April month, the April tab, you don't have to stop and think that May is the next one. Control page down moves you one sheet to the right. Control page down. Control page up, one sheet to the left. So that's going to be handy at different times too. Now, when you are looking at data too, sometimes it's handy to zoom in. And most people have become familiar with the lower right-hand corner of the screen. Starting in Excel 2007 and continuing in Excel 2010 and presumably well into the future, we have the slider bar. And certainly nothing wrong with that, but you do have to position the mouse just perfectly on that slider bar to zoom in and out, or possibly you click the minus and the plus on either side to zoom. But I think it's a lot easier at any time, without regard to where the mouse is, just hold down the control key and use the mouse wheel. So you can zoom in, you can zoom out anytime you want, for a variety of different reasons, of course. And obviously this has no impact on content. It's just a quick way. And when I'm teaching during live sessions, I'm often zooming in. I want things to be large and clear on the screen. So holding down control and using the mouse button is a fast way to get there. I am using Excel 2010 in this session, and nearly everything we do will work identically in Excel 2007 and in Excel 2013. A few new bells and whistles in 2013. When you right-click in the lower left-hand corner now, you get a list that shows 20 names with a scroll bar, so it's easier to see the additional worksheets when you have them. Now, within a given worksheet, it's always a good idea as you work with data to have some knowledge or some feeling for the extent of a given worksheet. How big is this worksheet? Well, you're not familiar with this company name, but how big is it? Just get in the habit of pressing Control-End. That's the END key, not the letter N. Control-End. Now, sometimes, as is the case here, this puts the active cell in a position on the screen, and it's like, well, what does that mean? There's nothing that tells us what this means. Think of it as the lower right-hand corner of the active part of this worksheet. You can be sure in this worksheet there is no data anywhere below row 742. There's no data anywhere to the right of column H. Remember, we've got over 16,000 columns, over 1 million rows, but nothing in this worksheet goes beyond this row or this column. And usually when you slide left here, you'll see data there. A curious thing about this, though, and it confuses people at times, maybe I'm sitting here, I get a phone call, I don't have a pencil or something. Somebody gives me a phone number, so I just kind of punch it in here or something. Later, I'll make the call, whatever. Get rid of this number, I don't need it. What happens at a later time if I press Control-End? It now goes down to row 746. Now, we're not going to worry about that, of course, but every so often what you might want to do is get rid of the truly empty rows simply by deleting them. That Control-End indicator still will not correct properly until you save the workbook. From there on in, it's going to work just fine. And going to the upper left-hand corner, of course, Control-Home, something we want to do, we need to do often. Both of these features, by the way, have a corresponding kind of meaning in Microsoft Word. Some of you may be familiar with that. Control-Home always takes us to the upper left-hand corner, and usually that means cell A1. Now, if you do have frozen titles, for example, it might take you to A2 or B2 or something like that. But in general, that's where it takes us, and that's what we want to do at different times. When you do work with a list, however, a list like this, sometimes you're working with some data here, maybe you're adjusting some spelling. You want to zip to the bottom of the list. You can do this two ways. With the mouse, simply double-click the bottom edge of the active cell. Click. You're down at the bottom. We're down here. We want to move up top. Double-click the top edge. That works actually in all four directions. You want to be careful not to do that on the lower right-hand corner. If your hands are on the keyboard, it's Control-Down arrow or up arrow, and that too works left and right as well. So moving up and down a column quickly and easily, either by double-clicking or Control-Down arrow, is what we need a lot of times. Notice that in column I, in this example, in this particular set of data, there are some empty cells there. They will remain empty. And of course, if we put the active cell in certain positions here, double-clicking the bottom edge is not going to take us very far. In fact, no matter how we do this, we're not going to get to the bottom of the column very fast at all. So double-clicking the bottom edge, in a certain sense, means move to the edge of the next set of data. Control down or below, almost the same, slight difference the way these work, but pretty much the same general idea. Now, if we need to add a new worksheet to this workbook, we can simply press Control, well, there are two ways actually. The easy way actually is simply to press Shift F11. New sheet to the left of the current sheet, Shift F11. If you want to add a sheet to the very right side, you'll have to go way off to the right, and you'll see you have to, in effect, display the rightmost worksheet first, and then you will see an indicator way off there to the right. That simply adds a sheet to the right. Notice that it says Insert Worksheet, Shift F11, but that's more efficiently used simply by, for example, if I want a new sheet in front of autofill right here, I'll press Shift F11, and a new worksheet will appear to the left of that, with a name like Sheet 1, Sheet 2, etc., something like that. Don't really need this, but can't undo it with the undo feature, so I'll right-click and delete that. If we want a brand new workbook, it's going to be Control-N. That's the letter N. Brand new workbook. Book 2, Book 3, whatever, that sort of thing. If we have multiple workbooks open, I think a lot of you know on the View tab, we can certainly switch windows this way, and certainly once in a while we want to use that button just to remind ourselves which other workbooks are open. And by the way, not a bad idea, I've already done it here, right-click that button, this is on the View tab, it's called Switch Windows, add it to your Quick Access toolbar. On my screen right now that feature is grayed out because I've already done it. So no matter which tab is active, if I want to see which other workbooks are open, here's this button right here in my Quick Access toolbar, drop arrow, simply I can jump to the other one, this one or another one. But faster is Control-Tab. I'm switching workbooks right now with Control-Tab. And it's particularly fast if you have only 2 workbooks open at the same time. Maybe you're copying data back and forth. It's really handy to be able to press Control-Tab to get back and forth. I've got a third one open here, and I don't really need it, so I'll close it. I can do that by way of Control-W. I haven't made any entries into it, so no prompt here about saving it. It's gone. So now Control-Tab truly is a toggle back and forth between 2 different workbooks. And certainly that's going to be really handy at times as well, too. You can also, by the way, use Control F6, just a little bit harder on the fingers perhaps, and that does work in Word, whereas Control-Tab doesn't. One other tip here, I don't use this very much myself, you might find it handy. In certain large worksheets, particularly those that are very wide, I've got one in here that I showed earlier, this one here, that's scientific data, pretty boring stuff, but if we want to move one screen to the right, now for example, column M is almost all visible, but not completely visible on the right. If I want column M to be the leftmost column, I'll press Alt Page Down. Alt Page Down. So there we are. And now column U is fully there. So if I press Alt Page Down, column V will be the next column as we move rightward. And sure enough, Alt Page Up moves us leftward. So just different techniques for moving around the different worksheet itself. Now, everybody knows how to do copy-paste, and there are hundreds, not hundreds, but certainly it seems like dozens of different ways to get that done. But there are some shortcuts that are widely overlooked. There's a few of them here coming up. I want a copy of this data because I want to experiment with the numbers a little bit, come up with some new formulas. What do? As nearly always, we want to select the data simply by dragging across it. 2 ways to copy this quickly. We don't have to go through the multi-step process of copy-paste. Why don't we just drag any edge of this with the Control key held down? Drag it to a different location, get it down here, get it over there, wherever we want to put it. Let go of the mouse first, and we made a copy of it. I want to undo that with Control-Z. We can also do this with the right mouse button. Point to any edge, drag it with the right mouse button. Drag it to here, there, wherever, let go. Then we have a menu, copy, move. So we could have used a move here, although moving is a lot simpler simply by dragging. So undoing that again. If we simply want to move this, point to any edge, drag it wherever we want, that's it. That's usually the fastest way, unless you're dragging it a few hundred rows or thousands of rows, something like that. Now, there are also some techniques here too for copying, not so well known. I've got a different worksheet here, and you can tell by the layout. I'll zoom in on it. In the upper portion here, we've got sales, expenses, and profits. And down here, we're measuring the percent of sales change, but for some reason, either not paying attention or something, we've got these 2 lines not in the same order. That doesn't make much sense. And it's pretty easy to insert a new row and then move the data and get rid of the empty row if necessary. But it's a lot easier and faster simply to drag this data upward why don't we highlight this data here? And I'll just drag it upward, this time with the Shift key. Drag it up to here, let go of the mouse, just simply note it. A shift drag it's called, and we can move data. We can do that. We could have done it here with the entire row. There's no other data to the right of it. In this case, I just used the cells. We can certainly do this with columns as well, too. For whatever reason here, we might want this phone number column to be to the left of Social Security. So we select it, drag any edge with the Shift key, drag it leftward in this case, let go of the mouse first, and simply move the data by way of a shift drag. And you can do this with multiple columns, and you can move them left or right any way you wish at different times. That's going to be handy as well, too. Now, sometimes when you, by the way, when you're copying a worksheet, rather than right-clicking and going into copy, which certainly isn't wrong, and it does have some advantages, particularly if you're copying to a different workbook, but many times you're simply trying to copy a worksheet within a given workbook. Say this one over here, I want to make a copy of this. I'm going to be dragging this to the right with the Control key held down. So drag it to the right, let go of the Control key, there it is. Takes no time at all. Those sheets are identical in every respect except for the name. All the column widths, all the row heights, all the formatting gets copied. And it's much more efficient than simply highlighting data and copying it. What you don't always get with that is the similar column widths, and sometimes the formatting is a little bit different too. So a control drag of a sheet tab is probably the best way, the fastest way to copy a worksheet. And by the way, you can also move a worksheet to a different workbook. It's a little bit awkward, but you can hold down the Alt key. And so in this case here, if I had another workbook present, or I do have one present, but if I want to view it on the same screen here, we can do it this way. But notice if I take profits here, and if I start to drag this, I hold down the Alt key. That's what we have to do here. Is on the View tab first, just to arrange all, to show all open workbooks. And now we can do this way. Actually, I think I got a little bit off track on that. And what I meant to do here, let me restate it here. Actually, what I want to do is actually to move some data to a different worksheet within the same workbook. So I'm going to be holding down Alt right here as I drag this data downward. And I actually don't want to move it, I want to do a copy. So I'm holding down Alt and Control, and I'm going to drag it onto the autofill sheet down here. Here's autofill, and put it somewhere on the autofill sheet. At this point, I could be letting go of Alt, and I will. So I'm out here, drag it down to here, and I'll let go of the mouse. And so I actually did a copy and onto a different worksheet of this data. I held down Control and Alt. If I just used Alt, I would have moved the data from here, and I didn't really want to do that. So we're a little bit off track there on that one. So you can get the idea. I think for most people, that's not the most efficient way because you do it rarely. It's probably better to do a standard cut and paste with Control X and Control V. Now, sometimes when you're working with data, you recognize you get a lot of similarity.
Dennis, we have a real quick request.
Okay.
So someone is asking, can we show again how to see multiple worksheets or books on screen at the same time?
Yes, on the View tab in the ribbon, there's a choice here called Arrange All. Now, if you do not check the box that says Windows of Active Workbook, all you're really doing is arranging the different open files. I have only 2 open files, so I'll click OK. And on the right side is the file called Pivot Table Consolidating Worksheets. The left side of my screen is Excel Tips Data. So 2 separate files, 2 separate workbooks. If you want to see different sheets of the same workbook, for example, this one on the right, what we need to do, and this is kind of clunky actually, but that's the way it is, what we need to do is create new windows. So I've got 4 regions here, East, Midwest, West, and South. If I'd like to see all 4 sheets at the same time here, what I need to do is create 3 new windows. So I have to click the New Window button 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and then Arrange All, but this time do check the box Windows of Active Workbook. Click OK. There we go. And now we're seeing 4, for the moment we're seeing 4 different windows, but I've got to now individually go to each window and pick the sheet I want. So in the upper left I'm clicking East, and on the upper right clicking Midwest,
lower left is west, lower right is south. And the zoom factors are independent of each other, so you probably have to do that sort of thing too. So we're now seeing 4 sheets from the same workbook. And I wish it were more efficient. And there is a change coming up in Excel 23 where we actually see a menu for each of these too. Now to close these down, what you got to do one by one is it looks as if you're closing a file, but you're not until you actually are closing the last of the 4. So close with this one, no prompt, click here, close that one. So I'm actually closing windows here, I'm not closing files. And now we're back here where we are seeing 2 separate files. And all we need to do in these cases too, if we only want to see one of them, is simply maximize the one that we want to view. So I'm going to go back to this one on the right here and simply maximize it. Now, suppose you're putting in a list here. I've got a list of cities. The names are going to be recurring. So in these 2 cells here, and in this one, and in the 3 cells down here, I want the word Boston. But rather than writing it once and then copying it multiple times, let's select all these cells ahead of time. A lot of you know, I think, you can select non-adjacent cells simply by using the Control key. So I'm going to highlight these 2 cells. I'm letting go of the left mouse button, and now with the Control key, I'm going to click here. Control is still held down. Highlight these 2. Come down here. So using the Control key. Now, as I type Boston, it looks as if the data is only going into one cell. And that's exactly what will happen if I simply press Enter. But I'm going to press Control Enter, and the same data goes in all those cells at the same time. And we can do this with numbers too. You can do it across multiple columns and different rows and so on. If those 2 numbers there, and this one, and this one, and these 3 right here all need to be 75. Type 75, press Control Enter. Same number goes in all of them. That's really handy at times. And when you're working with formulas too, you can do this sort of thing. So in this worksheet here off to the right, if I want totals right here and also totals right here, I'll use the Control key. Now, if it's simply a total, I don't even have to write a formula. On the Home tab, I can use the AutoSum button. It's also found on the Formulas tab. So on the Home tab off to the right, here's AutoSum. Click it. What do we got? Totals, both cases. If, on the other hand, if we wanted averages, actually could have kept those highlighted. We can use the drop arrow for AutoSum and choose average. Now we've got a bunch of averages for all these. So that's pretty handy too. Now also, earlier I showed you an example of how to copy data by using the right mouse button. Once again, if I want to make a copy of this, I can simply take this data using the right mouse button, drag it down here or wherever. When I let go of the right mouse button, how about copy here? So we can do that sort of thing. Those formulas get copied and adjusted as you would expect and hope. But there's another shortcut with copy paste that's incredibly valuable in some situations. I've got a sheet here called Mixed Names, and I don't like the look of column A because all the names are capitalized. So a nice function to be able to use here is proper. And when you write functions, of course, you don't really need to capitalize these. They will become capitalized later. But proper, when applied to this cell, and by the way, notice I'm not typing the right parentheses. You don't need to do that when your formulas are, when you're using functions that are not nested. So I don't have to put in the right parentheses here. And another tiny tip too. If I press Enter, this will do the job, but it will move the active cell into cell B3. And I want to copy this, so I'm not going to press Enter. I'm going to press Control Enter. Keeps the active cell in place. Copy this down the column. We can certainly drag from the corner, but it's much faster to double-click the lower right-hand corner. And we've got all those in place.
Dennis, we have a question.
Yes.
So someone asks, or Julie Quick has asked, can you use AltSum for AutoSum? So is that another alternative?
You can use Alt equal for AutoSum. Alt equal. Let me go back there real quickly, and I'll come back here too. Oops, wrong place. If I highlight these cells, and then using the Control key highlight these, I can press Alt equal, and we have answers there. That's the keystroke shortcut for AutoSum, Alt equal. Okay, back to the mixed names. In all cases here, by the way, the proper function, its purpose is to capitalize all letters, all text that is
that follows punctuation or space or begins the entry. So of course the first letters of all the names are capitalized. Notice that the B in O'Brien is capitalized here. You see how it looks over here. The B in O'Brien is capitalized, and all the first names, since they follow a space, get capitalized as well. And I meant to put in a name here. I'll do it real fast here. How about this person's last name is really Todd Jones. Dash. The J is going to be capitalized. Watch the cell to the right. See what happens there. Now, the issue now is, and you run into this a lot, we've got a whole bunch of formulas here, and what we really want to do is keep the results of the formulas. And perhaps some of you know you can copy this and then do a paste special and then choose values and all that, but it's really fast to simply select these cells that have formulas and take one of two actions. One is simply to drag this data on top of the old data using the right mouse button. So I'm going to hold down the right mouse button, drag this on top of the old data. When I release the right mouse button, there's that menu, copy here as values only. There we are. So what are we left with right here? That is long, comma, space, Ryan, and nothing else, exactly the way we want it to be. Now, let me undo that. At other times, what you might want to do is simply, in effect, convert these formulas into data by copying them to themselves. So with the right mouse button here, I'm simply going to drag this into column C, and in one fluid motion, right back into column B. So right, left, let go. There it is. Copy here as values only. What are we left with here? Long, comma, space, Ryan, exactly the way we want it to be. So that's really a handy tool for dragging that way, that right mouse button. We'll probably see this come up in another example here too. Okay, let's also talk about just one of the most boring things we have to do at different times, data entry. I haven't run into anybody yet who loves data entry, but we all have to do this at different times. A couple of shortcuts, a few of these are very well known, I think. Anytime you're putting in months and you want to put them down a column or across a row, you could type an abbreviation like JAN, and you can start with any month you want. Drag from the fill handle in the lower right-hand corner as far as you need this. Sometimes you drag it too far, that's okay. If it's a full spelling or if it's uppercase, either or, and those are going to work too. If you drag rightward, the same effect will happen. If you drag upward, which is pretty unusual, you move backward in time. If you drag leftward, you move backward in time, that sort of thing. So all these work the same way. If you do use abbreviations, they must be 3 letters. For example, if you start with SEPT, normally you wouldn't start there, but if you do, you simply will get a repeat of those if you drag from the corner. If it's SEP, of course, we will get the next month, next month, next month, depending upon which direction we drag and so on. I'm going to get rid of these by pressing delete. Most people would. You can also delete by dragging the fill handle over it. It just sort of feels like erasing. It's not any more efficient, but make you feel good. So these are all pretty much designed the same way. Days of the week too, of course. Don't ever start with TUES or THUR. It's got to be 3 letters if you're using abbreviations. There will be times too when you want to have a repeat. I want July here 3 times. Maybe I'm not thinking, and suddenly I realize I've got 2 other months. But let's ignore that. Let's hold down the Control key and drag down. We will get a repeat here. Now, if we want to put in today's date, sometimes you type that frequently throughout the day. Don't do it anymore. Press Control semicolon. That puts in today's date. That works in Access too, by the way, but not in Word. I think in Word it's Control-Alt-D. If you want the current time, and by the way, I'm in the Mountain Time Zone, Control-Shift semicolon. Control-Shift semicolon. Now, neither of these will change. They're static unless you change them. They're not dynamic in any way. If you want to put in today's date in a dynamic way, equal today. And here, too, you need only type the left parenthesis as you type this and press Enter. And for the moment, those look, well, font's different, but for the moment, let's say those are identical, and we can all 11 here. But if I save this file and open it tomorrow, this entry will read 5/10. This one's going to stay the same. It was entered with Control semicolon. If you want to put in date and time together, it's equal NOW, left parenthesis. That will put in date and time together. You can format that differently. And by the way, a quick way to format it is if you simply want a date there, it's Control-Shift #. And that's the date display. That's the only keystroke shortcut for dates, Control-Shift #. But sometimes you want it, and that would make sense possibly here. If you wanted to display the time, it's Control-Shift-@, and that displays it with AM, PM style. Now, in both of these cases, or let's say in this case here, if I go about my business here and do some other things and look back up here, it's probably going to have a different time. But if I just sit and stare at it, nothing's going to happen. Remember, what it really is a function. And so it's constantly monitoring the time, and it will change it when necessary if I go about my work and do other things. And by the way, both of these functions provide the answer for a frequently asked question. Why is it with a certain workbook, I open it, I look at it, sometimes I just look at it for information, and as I close it, I get this prompt that says, do you want to save your changes? And I'm saying to myself, I never made any changes. But yes, you did if you have the now function or the today function in a workbook. They automatically get changed every time you open the workbook, and then frequently during your use of it if it's the now function. So I'm going to type in some data here, press enter, and now that says 1231. And you'll quickly lose your fascination for that. But anyway, you get the idea. That's dynamic. That will change. With data entries, a lot of you know if you drag them from the corner, you get next day, next day, next day. That's really handy. And some people get used to that idea and are surprised because they saw how it happens with July. They saw how it might happen with Sunday. That idea, that's all handy. And then they put in a number. It doesn't have to be 1, but let's put in 1. What happens when we drag a number from the corner? Nothing. It just repeats it. If you do want to increment it by 1, hold down the Control key, drag from the corner. You will increment these by 1. Be sure to let go of the mouse first when you're doing that. Now, when you want to create a series, and you can do this with times or numbers, if you want a series, I want a series, for example, 100, and then 150, and then 200, just put in 2 values, highlight both of them. The interval, of course, is 50. We drag from the corner as far as we need this. It's simply going to provide us every 50 for however many we want. If we started lower right here and highlighted these 2 and drag upward, it's going to go negative on us eventually, but that's what happens. So it's easy to create a series with the same interval. Just highlight or create 2 different entries with a certain interval, and then drag from the corner upward or downward as necessary. And these 2, of course, do work horizontally. To the right increments them, to the left decrements them, and so on. And with dates, we can provide similar intervals too. Today is a Friday. Maybe it's your payday, maybe not. So 7 days from today is the 16th. So I'll make this be the 16th. Highlight both of those. That's a 7-day interval. So here's our list of Fridays from now until whenever. If you get paid today and then 2 weeks from today, let's make this be the 23rd. Here too, we've got an interval, but now that's an interval of 14 days. So we'll drag that from the corner, and now we've got our interval of 14 days. For as far as we drag this. Oops. And you'll be happy to know that this date time system in Excel is designed to work until the year 10,000. So there are any number of shortcuts here too for putting in dates and different kinds of days too. One other shortcut that's really handy too. Let's say you're starting a project next Monday. That's the 12th, and I'm going to start from this cell right here. We'll make that be the 12th. Makes no difference if I have any data under this. What I want below this, though, and going well into the future, is a list of weekdays. Now, if I simply drag the corner, what do we get? Day after day after day. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and so on, so on, so on. No gaps whatsoever. But if we want weekdays, use the right mouse button. Drag from the corner. We're not always sure how far we want to drag it. Let's drag it down to there. Let go and fill weekdays. So those are all weekdays. So starting here, we'll do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Notice the gap. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It doesn't do holidays. That's a holiday. But Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and so on and so on. So there's some nice shortcuts there when it comes to entering dates and times in Excel. And again, remember, for today's date, Control semicolon. All right, let's talk about some formulas and some tips here. I'm going to go to a different worksheet here. We saw this portion of the worksheet before. What if it turns out, after looking at this data and checking my records here, I realized that whoever came up with these numbers, suppose it's some kind of an index, some kind of a pricing index or something that we're going to be using elsewhere. These numbers are off. They're off by 5. I want them all to be increased by 5, and the list, of course, could be much, much larger. And rather than writing a formula, Why don't we just increment these by 5 quickly? Pick an empty cell somewhere, put in a 5. Let's copy it. How about Control-C? Select this data, and now we're going to go to Paste Special. Paste Special has a nice shortcut. Control-Alt-V. V, a lot of you know, Control-V is Paste. Control-Alt-V is Paste Special. So what are we going to do here? We copied that 5. Now we're going to add. Keep your eye on a few numbers. The 33 in the upper left-hand corner is going to be 38, 40, 45, and so on. We'll click OK. And all the numbers have been incremented. There's no paper trail here. There are no formulas. We have no record of what was here before. We don't need the 5. We can get rid of it. How about another scenario? These are last year's numbers. You want to project these to be 10% bigger. And again, without formulas and without keeping this data. Let's come up with a new list here that's 10% bigger. And here the math is a little trickier, but I think most of you know if we multiply by 1.1, the 30 is going to be a 33, the 40 is going to be a 44, and so on. So let's put 1.1 into a nearby cell and copy it, Control-C or right-click copy, whatever. Select the data, and once again, Control-Alt-V to get us into Paste Special. There we are. This time we'll do multiply. Click OK. We'll probably need a formula or formatting adjustment. There we are. Sure, it's OK. Possible. So you could leave it that way or simply standardize it up here with the comma button. Another alternative keystroke shortcut, Control-Shift exclamation point or Control-Shift-1, same key. Control-Shift-1. It will give us 2 decimals, but it will standardize the display with that one. And if you want fewer decimals, you could come up here. Click the button to show decreased decimals if you wished. But we incremented all of these simply by copying the 1.1 using Paste Special and multiply to change all those. All right, off to the left here. We've got a big list. This is a list that's about 700 rows, and we're trying to scope out this organization. How much are they spending on their salaries? By the way, it should have been compensation because we got some half-time and hourly people here. But anyway, salary's good enough. What are we spending on salaries here? You're likely to see this at the bottom of the screen in the status bar. Now, possibly you won't because this can be modified. On my screen, down in the status bar, I'm seeing average count, numerical count, minimum, maximum, and sum. If you right-click in the status bar, you see a ton of arrows, or check marks. In this section right here, there are 6 different statistical measures. I usually leave them all checked. Sometimes I might turn one off, but usually I don't. It doesn't hurt. These are activated anytime you highlight 2 or more cells with values. So we know at a glance what the average is here. That's a little bit misleading because we've got full-time and hourly people and so on. But in other situations, I think you know that'd be really valuable. We see the total amount being spent on these salaries. We click column H, average years of service here, 11.56. Average hire date even. Was in 2002. The most recent hire was on March 22nd. We see that in the lower right-hand corner with max. The oldest hire in this, in terms of when the person was hired, was back 21 years, 1993. Average job rating. These come in handy, and in list-type situations like this, simply click the column letter. And that leads us into another shortcut, too. What if we simply want to have, and I'll put it out here temporarily, what if we simply want to know here and have it on the screen all the time, the total salary? We can start with auto sum or alt equal, either way. And Excel gets it wrong here. Sometimes it does. Now, we want to add up all those salaries from J2 down to J700 or whatever. But rather than highlighting them, why don't we just click column J and enter. Now let me zoom in on that because that notation might look strange at first. It simply means the entire column. And it has one decided, or at least one major advantage, and that is if this list grows or shrinks, the formula still works. Another advantage is it looks simple and easy and straightforward. Nothing complex about that, and a lot easier to read than something that says J2 colon J742, and then you have to adjust it every time you added or took out records or something. So it's much faster that way. If you want to do average, we can use the drop arrow for auto sum, choose average, click column J, and enter. If you want to do something like median, you're going to have to type it. It's not in the list. Here too, remember, we're not using uppercase. Left parenthesis, click column J. We don't need the right parenthesis. We simply press enter. So we can get to some of these functions pretty easily and pretty quickly too. If we're going to put in a new salary here, we do have to, let's say everybody's going to get a 2.91% increase here. Any number of different ways to write this formula. One way might be J2. Notice I'm clicking on the cell. If you type it, you don't have to capitalize it. Clicking at least eliminates the typing mistake. And that's appropriate at times when the cells are nearby. Equal J2 times this cell right here plus J2. There's certainly other ways. You might use parentheses and say M1 plus 1, do it that way. One thing that is of concern, though, if we were to copy this formula, the reference to M1 will become M2, M3, M4, etc. Just a quick example of that. If I drag this from the corner, only one person is going to be happy about this new salary business. What happens on the next entry? M1 has become M2. So a pretty well-known shortcut these days is after putting in the M1, and you can come back and do it later or you can do it now. You can click after the M1, between the two, in front of it, or highlight them. Any of those doesn't make any difference. Press F4. Now, if you've never seen this feature before, you might mistakenly conclude, oh, I get it, it's because it's salaries, we're using dollar signs. That's not the reason. The dollar sign is simply a symbol which, when used with cell addresses, means when this gets copied, the M will never change and the 1 will never change. That's what it means. There are slightly more complex examples where the dollar sign is needed in front of the row or the column reference, but not both. In this case, we want it in front of both, or it doesn't hurt to have it in front of both. So that's going to be our master formula, and I'll simply press Control-Enter here. We don't need these for the moment, although we ideally sometimes just test them out. So we want to copy this down the column. What do? We're not going to drag it. It's 700 rows. We'll double-click the lower right-hand corner. And here's a shortcut not so well known. Let's say I think the first thing most people would want to do, just make sure you know how far this got copied. Rather than scrolling, press Control period. I'm simply pressing Control period back and forth. And Control period, its purpose, and it sounds strange out of context, is simply to move the active cell around the selected range. So let me press Control Z and do this again. I've got a formula here. It calculates a new salary. We've got an absolute reference so that the formula refers to M2 no matter where we copy it. We want to copy it down the column. We've got a big list here off to our left. I'll double-click the lower right-hand corner. I want to see how far it got copied. I'll press Control period. It goes all the way down to row 742. I might scroll just beyond it just to make sure. Yep, 742, that's it. Control period takes us right back up top. Explain out of context, the tip looks ridiculous. Here are a bunch of cells. I'm going to press Control period. Exciting, right? That's all it does. That's all Control period does. It simply moves the active cell around the corners of the range, of the highlighted range. In this case, the range got highlighted automatically when we copied the formula by double-clicking. All right, some other formula tips here. I've got a different worksheet here that's a real mess, and I've made it actually worse. I got it about 10 years ago, and I made it worse and worse and worse. First of all, it's a visual mess. Nothing jumps out. There's no emphasis on anything. We've got formulas here. We've got formulas there. It sure would be handy if we could see all the formulas. I'm going to press Control tilde. Now, some of you are saying, what's tilde? And some of you might know, some of you might not. There's also a command for doing this. I'll press this again. Let me first of all zoom in and point out that on most keyboards in the upper left-hand corner, above the Tab key to the left of the number 1 below the Escape key, you'll see a key with these two symbols. And for whatever reason, they don't have a name that a lot of us relate to. The lower symbol is actually called accent grave, as used in French on the letter E and possibly the letter A too, I think. The upper symbol is called tilde, T-I-L-D-E, or sometimes A. And you'll find it in Spanish over the letter N. I think you find it in Portuguese over the letter A at different times. Anyway, whatever that key is, and do not use the Control key, simply use Shift with this key, and a strange thing happens. All column widths are doubled, but more important, formulas wherever they exist are displayed. For example, in cells B7. If we want to go back to normal, we simply press this again, Control tilde. Now, you will see this in the menu, but it's so easily overlooked, the shortcut that is, because they refer to the other symbol. Now, on the Formulas tab, there's a button called Show Formulas. When you slide over it, the pop-up tip below it You can barely see it. It says Control plus and it uses the other symbol. And I saw this in a book once and it looked like a speck of dirt. In other words, the way they're displaying this as the keystroke shortcut, and it's not wrong, it's not to say that they're doing it wrong, but they're using this symbol. That is so tiny, particularly on the pop-up tip. That's why it's not a well-known tip, and it really should be because it's really handy. It's a great troubleshooting tip. You want to get oriented with the worksheet. It's got lots of formulas in it. It's not solving all your problems, but you can see what's happening there. And it's not a bad idea when you're doing this sometimes. Readjust the column width and print this in its current form and use it as a source of documentation. And when you do print it, also show the column letters and row numbers too.
So
by the way,
Dennis,
shortcut, go ahead.
I just wanted to announce some of the great tips that are coming in while you're speaking. So if you don't know this, I'm sure many in our audience do know this, but if it's the first time you've seen that F4, if you hold that and hit F4 and you keep hitting it, it's going to rotate through the different cell references. Thanks to Trish for that. And Chris tells us that the tilde is on the right of the UK keyboard. So I didn't even know that. So if you're searching for your tilde and you're using the keyboard,
yeah, I have seen it. You're right. I have seen it in the upper right. Although most of the time it's in the upper left. But yeah, I wish they'd used a big fat symbol like @ sign or something else.
Right.
You all remember, but they didn't. Yeah, let me go back to the other point after I finish this here too. And once again, Control tilde here. On that earlier example, I didn't want to go too far afield now, but since somebody brought it up, I do want to mention this. There are times when you're copying formulas here, or when you're about to copy a formula here, and you want this reference to, if you simply press F4 repeatedly, it cycles through the 4 variations. For example, right now there's no absolute addressing at all. Now we've got absolute addressing for the column and the row. Now we've got it for just the row, but not the column. Now, in a strict sense, we could, in this example here, use this feature. The column reference doesn't have to be absolute because we're copying this downward. We're not in any way shifting into other columns. So this will work here. I'll double click. Yeah, but the F4 key, you're right, does cycle through variations on that. Now, going back to this other worksheet, the one that's a mess here. Another tool, well, not exactly a shortcut, but reasonably short to get to, is it would be handy if we could highlight all the cells that do have formulas. So if you jump, first of all, make sure you select one cell. Here's a curious thing about Excel with some features. If you've got some cells highlighted and then activated certain commands, the search or the action only takes place within the highlighted cells. But if you click one cell, this is counterintuitive, it looks in the entire worksheet. And so the feature we're about to use, we want to check the entire worksheet to know which cells have formulas. So click any single cell, makes no difference where it is, just one cell, then go to the Home tab in the ribbon, the extreme right button, Find and Select, and then choose Formulas. And all the cells with formulas are highlighted. What I often do in situations like this is immediately apply a color to them. So over on the Home tab in the font group right here, bucket here is yellow. That's good enough for me. I'll just use that. Otherwise, I'll hit the arrow, choose another color, but yellow is just fine. Click that. And then outside. So I know at a glance where the formula cells are. They're yellow. Now, it's not dynamic. If I delete a cell that's got a formula in it, it's going to stay yellow, or if I add a new formula here, it's not going to automatically turn yellow. So every so often, you might want to rerun the feature if you like this idea of seeing formulas at a glance. In a more extended way, you can also, by clicking on a single cell, and this takes more time, go out to Find and Select, and then go to Special, and then select the constants. And if you only wanted to highlight the constant numbers, you can uncheck Text Logic Equals Errors, click OK, and then simply highlight the cells that have pure numbers in them. Maybe give them a different color or something. So I'll make them be blue or whatever. So you can do that too. And again, when you're working with it and you're trying to quickly come up to speed with it, knowing where the formulas are, knowing where the pure numbers are, certainly is going to make some sense. Okay, some other tips here. Here's a quick chart tip. Got some data here. I want to create a chart.
and is often the case many times in Excel, unless your data is surrounded by spaces and if we wanted all of this to appear in the chart, and that would not be a good idea, by the way, since these numbers are decimals really and small, and these are quite large compared to the others. Most of the time you just want to highlight the data, include the labels that you usually have on top and to the left of the data. Now, two quick shortcuts here. One's been around for a long time. If you want a chart of this data on a separate sheet, press F11. Suddenly you've got a new sheet and there's a chart. It's called Chart 1 in this case. It's just to the left of the sheet that's got the data. If you want a chart on the same worksheet, press Alt F1. There's a chart. And I think these days it seems as if more people want their charts right next to the data or nearby. Not always, but when you do, Alt F1 is very, very fast. Get you there fast. Now, when you're moving these around, you can either drag an edge or simply drag. Usually, you can drag just inside the data, and nearly always in the upper right corner is where you want to do this, because as you drag this, you're not dragging the inner part of the chart. If you start to click and drag in here, you might be doing that. I'll undo it. Control Z. Just drag inside. You don't have to position it exactly, but you can certainly drag from the border. When you're moving these around, if you have a certain need to make it just look so-so, as you're dragging these corners or sides, hold down the Alt key, and it's as if the dragging has a sort of magnetic attraction to the corners. Automatically lines them up with the cell boundaries. So I'm dragging this downward. It can go anywhere. But if I hold down Alt, it's only going to let me take these to the boundaries of cells. So I'll let go of the mouse first. So, and you have to click outside of it to see the effect of that. It's most efficient to do this from opposite corners. It takes care of two sides at once. I want this to more or less line up like this. So hold down Alt. There we go. Let go of the mouse. And now it's just perfectly aligned with the cell boundaries. Now, here's an oddity you want to be aware of. Two sets of data here looking very similar. I want to click in the top set of data here. Because this is surrounded by empty cells, I don't even have to highlight the data. Just click inside of it and then press Alt F1. Great, we got a chart. Keep looking at it though, and it's not so great. The more you look at it, the more you realize that's not a great chart. What has Excel done here? It has mistakenly taken the years and treated them as data. That's 2008. This bar right here represents 2008 as a value. And the labeling below it looks off too. That's not what we want. Now the data down here is different in only one sense, upper left corner. So I'll click down here, press Alt F1. What do we got? We got a great chart here, and this one really does work. The labels are in sync, and we don't have any columns in that chart that were mistakenly referring to those years. So much better. Now, if we want to put in the word region, we can now copy it in here later. Why not? But that's just a strange thing you'll run into. It seems to happen only with years. I've tried this with months and days and other time frames, and it seems to only happen with years, and not even consistently there too. So that's an odd thing. Be on the lookout for that sort of thing. All right, so other tips, some formatting tips here. Okay. I mentioned already a good keystroke shortcut when dealing with times, or with dates, I should say. And of course, you have to appreciate whether you like it or not. There's only one. First of all, there are many, many ways to format cells by way of formatting cells, the actual command. And a fast way to get there is Control-1. Control-1. Now, I said that the first time you do that, in other words, since I first logged in, I haven't used it, so that's why it's taking a while. Usually it's instantaneous. Control-1 always activates the Format Cells dialog box. It doesn't necessarily highlight the tab that you want, but let's say in this case it might, number tab, and there's a ton of date options in there. Usually most people can find something they like in there, so that's fine. But if you simply want a different display and you want to eliminate any possible doubt about which month it is, the keystroke shortcut Control-Shift-#, there we go, that might be the one you want. Now notice off to the left here too, phone numbers here, that's not the way we typically display phone numbers. Let's say, and I did this on purpose, but let's say the person who put these in said, I know there's a way to get in those dashes later, but I'm just going to skip them now. I'd rather type 9 characters than 11. That was a good thought. So click column D here, We jump right into Format Cells with Control 1, this time it'll be fast. And right under Special, there we go, Social Security number. Click OK. We've got our dashes once we readjust the column width by double-clicking. There we go. And if we double-click here, we don't see them. If you look in the formula bar, you don't see them. Same general idea with whoops, I got my, oh, is it Friday, is it Monday? I did it backwards. This should be, I should have chosen phone here. Probably a lot of you are saying, what is he doing? Okay, Control 1, sorry, phone number, there we go. Okay. And here's Social Security number, same place. Control 1, Special Social Security number. Jeez. Okay, sorry for the confusion, my fault. So in both cases here, why type 14 characters when you can only type 10? Of course, the best way to do this is do the formatting almost from the beginning or from the beginning, and then as you enter the numbers, you strictly type the numbers, not the symbols. If you edit by double-clicking or if you click on the formula bar, either way, you don't see those symbols, you don't need to type them, you don't want to do that at all. Save yourself some time on those. Now, here's another thought. Earlier, we had pressed F11 to create a new sheet to the left of this. Now, here's what I'd like to do. I'm going to copy some data there. And I don't want to copy the ADC people here, so I'm going to hide rows 2 through 6. And I don't want to copy all this data. In fact, I don't need the phone numbers, social security numbers. I don't want to show that. So drag across these, right-click, and hide those two. What I do want to copy is this data here. And just for the admin training people. Now remember, within that list are some hidden rows and some hidden columns. So I've got the data highlighted. I press Control-C. I'll jump over to the other sheet right here and press Control-V. And I'm dismayed, I'm upset, whatever. We've got those hidden rows came through, all this other stuff. I'm going to adjust the column width, but I didn't want this data. It did all kinds of things that I didn't want. So I'm going to go back to the data and press Alt semicolon, and then press Control-C, and then go back to that other sheet, and just to the right of this, I'm going to do my paste, Control-V. There we go, much, much better. We only have the admin training. Let me readjust all these column widths here. We only have the admin training people, see off to the right there. And we don't have the phone numbers and social security numbers, just the visible data. So it's this Alt semicolon business. And by the way, I could have hidden some other rows to make this jump out even more. When you press Alt semicolon, it means select the visible data within the highlighted cells. Alt semicolon. Now, if you forget that keystroke shortcut, good luck in finding it. Now again, here's the scenario. Maybe to make it a little more obvious this time, I'm going to hide, let's say that Ricky and Alicia and Deborah here just left recently. We don't want their names in the list. Right-click. I should show it a different way. I'm going to click on the 12 for Erickson. With the Control key, I'll click row 14, and also mark Nash down here in row 17. So using the Control key and clicking, selecting these 3 rows, right-click and hide. Got those hidden. Here's the data we want to copy, just this part here. We're ready to do the copy, but we forgot that keystroke shortcut for selecting just the visible data. It's on the Home tab. Well, that's helpful. Way off to the right, find and select, and then, believe it or not, go to Special, and then down in here, Visible Cells Only. If only Microsoft would have put a little keystroke shortcut indicator to the right. It's Alt semicolon instead of all this, although this works. There we go. And you see what it's doing more clearly now. It's selecting just the cells that are visible. Each one is in its own rectangular block. We'll press Control-C. We're copying only this data. Then go over to the empty sheet, and we'll paste it down here this time. Control-V. There we go. A shorter list than before. And so on. So Alt semicolon or that long command sequence to get there. Now, in a filtered list, you don't worry about this at all. Remember, a filter hides data. When you highlight data in a filtered list and copy or paste it, you get only the visible data. Other times, perhaps you're working with the subtotal feature in Excel, or maybe you just manually hidden columns and rows. If you want to copy-paste this data, you want to be sure not to get that hidden data. You actually don't want to copy it.
Great. So
All right,
Dennis,
one more tip
sorry.
here in formatting. Imagine here, first of all, I'm going to get rid of all this data. Just drag it across the top here, right-click and delete. I'm starting a new worksheet maybe. We have a name here, make the column wider eventually. I want to put in 2014 salary here. The column doesn't really need to be as wide as the label is going to be. I want the word salary under 2014, so I'll press Alt-Enter and type salary. And over here, I want to put in their tax rate, the 2014 tax rate. It's going to be only a letter or two, so 2014, Alt-Enter, tax, Alt-Enter, and then rate. Enter. I think I did that too fast. I should try it again. I'm going to come back and edit, actually. Double-click right behind the 14 there. Alt-Enter, tax, Alt-Enter, and then rate. There we go. We get that one. And probably in these situations, too, you might consider formatting these using the middle of the line or top of the line. But the point is, you can do line wrap here. It's always best to have your titles in a single row. If you're going to be working with the table capability in Excel, or just working with any list, when you do sorting and filtering the subtotals, pivot tables, get your titles into a single row. This is going to help for when you think you need longer titles. Don't stack them up in separate rows. Put them in the same cell this way if you want to stack them. So that's going to be helpful at times too.
Great. Cool.
All right, here's another one.
Dennis, sorry.
Yes.
Well, you're free to go on beyond the 3 o'clock. We have hit the hour.
I want to do just one more, but
Okay.
there might be
Hey,
some
I'm all
questions.
for it. I just want to make sure that people out
Okay,
there
yeah.
are willing to stick around. So we thank you for sticking around, too.
First of all, a small tip here. I've got hidden columns. I've got hidden rows. If I only want to get back a single hidden column, for example, maybe I've hidden column J. Right-click, hide. Okay, at a later time I want to get back just that column. Drag across the column letters. Double-click the column boundary. It's also almost as fast. You drag across. You right-click and unhide. Same idea. Okay. Now, what if we've got a situation, somebody sends us this workbook, we're looking at this worksheet, we see all kinds of missing letters up there. There might be others way off to the right. Let's take care of all of them at once. We don't know how many hidden columns there are. We click in the upper left corner and then double-click any column boundary. And all hidden columns, no matter where they are, in the entire worksheet come back at the same time. We've got some hidden rows all over the place. The entire worksheet is selected already. We'll simply double-click any row boundary between two numbers. Double-click. There we go. And all of our hidden rows are back too. Now, I'm going to do a quick print preview of this with Control F2. And as I'm looking at it, I'm saying, you know, we really need to print this out double-spaced. This is what single-space printing looks like. I can emphasize this more strongly by going to Page Setup and making sure that we do, by way of the Sheet tab, show the grid lines. Okay, so that's what single-spacing looks like. And you're saying, I want this to be double-spaced. Well, rather than coming up with some kind of a crazy macro or something that, we'll press Escape first of all to go back, Escape. We don't need any kind of crazy macro to double the width of the row, or to add new rows or anything like that. How about simply clicking in the upper left corner, dragging any row boundary to be about twice as tall? It doesn't have to be exact, close enough. There we go. Okay. And now, by way of Control F2, how's that print preview look now? Looks like double spacing, doesn't it? Now, some people might quibble and say, well, yeah, could you put the names in the middle of the cell instead of at the bottom? Well, we saw how to do that earlier. Simply press Escape here. The entire worksheet's selected. Why don't we just, on the Home tab here, on the Wrap Text section right here, actually the Alignment section right here. Well, that's, I'm sorry, right here. There we go. So now they're more or less in the center here in Control F2. So it looks that way. So that's double spaced compared to what we saw before. It really is. And how do we undo this? We simply press Escape here. We do our printing in the meantime. Come back here, double-click one of these boundaries, and we're right back to normal. So that's really fast. Of course, you could have done triple spacing, whatever. Take care of that too. So a lot of different shortcuts in Excel. And believe me, there are a lot of others too. I mean, out of the woodwork, here's one. Robert here is left. We don't want to delete the record just yet. We want to indicate by way of strike through that he's no longer here. So we press Control 5, which is a toggle on-off for strike through. Not the world's most important keystroke shortcut, but, you know, occasionally handy.
Very cool.
So we could go on, but let's call it.
I just learned that. That's so cool. I've never seen that before. Okay, so
The strange thing is that that's not available in Word, and you would think that's where you'd really want to use it. There's no keystroke shortcut in Word to strike through it.
So
The macro.
if you have any questions, feel free to add them to the questions box. We have two. So Thomas asks, is there a way to auto-fit columns without showing hidden ones? Having to do it one by one after hiding some columns is somewhat tiresome, and I know the feeling.
Yeah,
So
yeah. AutoFit brings back all the hidden ones. Now, possibly, let's see what we could do here. Let me try it this way real fast. Now, if I hide column S, or column E here, Social Security, and now I go to the Review tab and protect the worksheet, and I make sure that I'm not allowing anybody to format columns. Now, of course, let me try it this way first. I don't think we'll be able to unhide here, but let me try this. I am going to allow formatting of columns. Click OK. So now it's in protected state. I'm going to hide columns B and C, right-click and hide, so I can do that. I suspect that when I unhide, I am going to get the Social Security numbers back. So if you click in the upper left-hand corner, double-click a column boundary, yeah, it did come back. So that method doesn't work. But
the way I
well,
see it is,
yeah.
if you knew what you were selecting, I mean,
Yeah.
what was the shortcut to select only the ones showing in the range, so you would just select those columns? I usually just take control and select the columns I'm interested in, and then
Yeah,
auto-fit
yeah.
on those. Not exactly the best method, obviously not
Right,
a power
right.
trick.
Yeah,
But
yeah. By the way, I didn't mention, but you should be on the lookout, too, for hidden worksheets. And I routinely do that. People don't use that very often. In fact, I usually use it just for demo purposes. For example, here, if I right-click any sheet, and one of the choices is if there are hidden sheets, you'll see unhide. Now, in this workbook, there are not right now, but if I hide this worksheet, there we go. I might forget about it. I'll send this workbook to somebody else, or maybe myself later. I'm looking around here. I'm looking at this, looking at that, whatever. And I wonder if there are any hidden sheets here. Right-click. Oh, yeah, unhide. And a box pops up. And by the way, if you have 3 or 4 or any number here, you can only unhide one at a time. There's no way to unhide multiple ones. But it is something to be on the lookout for. If you didn't want anybody to see that there were hidden worksheets, and I can't, you kind of start making up strange scenarios maybe, but if you do protect a workbook and simply go with the minimal here, put in the password and so on, when a workbook is protected, you will not be able to see or even know if there are hidden worksheets because you do a right-click and the feature is grayed out completely.
So, is there a way, so Eric has asked, is there a way to have a long list of data in column A and print wrap itself to print onto one sheet instead of just printing onto multiple sheets?
Well, let's see. In other words, maybe, suppose it's 700 names like my list here, but it doesn't have anything else next to it, and you want to print that? Yeah. There's no easy direct way. I mean, it might be worth writing a macro for that sort of thing.
Well, say 60 rows. By the way, Eric asks this, so just want to give a shout out to the people asking questions. Thank you very much. We want to make this a very interactive session.
Yeah, imagine my worksheet has only column A. Well, first of all, I mean, what I could do is just copy the worksheet real fast here, and then here's the copied version. I'll just get rid of all the other data.
How fast you did that. Power trick.
I can't think of a good fast way to do it. Yeah, you're right. If I press Shift or Control F2 here for the print preview, bottom of the screen says it's going to take 17 pages, and I'd like to see all the names now. I think that's one of those cases where maybe a macro would work, and you could do it in such a way that no matter how big the list is, what you probably want to do, I think, would be to possibly just go down to about row 60 or wherever it is you want to do a break and just copy the data and paste it up in column B and so on. It is kind of boring, isn't it? Yeah. Well, you could see
if I momentarily, I'm just thinking out loud, if I momentarily come down and hide these, and then select everything from here down, now I'm going to hold down the Shift key and double click the bottom edge, and then press Control period here, and a couple times. So I'm back up top. I'm going to drag this into column B. Now, the problem here is that I come back and double click. Yeah. Shift, hold down Shift, double click. Now, if I right click, and this is way too long to delete and shift the cells upward, that's just not very fast. I'm thinking some variation on that. Now, if you recorded that in the macro, say you did for 3 columns or so, you develop the code that would then allow you to do a do loop in front of you. Complete a macro in not too much time, but I'm thinking there could be ways to do it that way. And here's another thought. Let me press Control Z a few times. Oops. Another thought might be put a sequence number next to all these, maybe to the left of them. So we'll insert here, and just put in a 1 and a 2. By highlighting both of these and double clicking, we'll have sequence numbers all the way up and down there. Let's see now. We could, by way of a filter here, now what I'm thinking of, and do it this way. Okay, so how about a filter here that, and this might take a little bit of work. If the number is greater than or equal to, again, this is taking too much time. If it's greater than or equal to 60 and less than or equal to 120, okay, then show it. We're only showing those. Now, while these are visible, we could copy paste just these. Again, that's just taking too long. I don't have a good quick answer for it. I'm just trying to think out a way to do that efficiently. Yeah. Another way could be, and this would be pretty likely too, although a lot of work up front, but eventually this might work too. You could have a formula here that says equal B61. And this is going to say equal B121. In other words, every 60 or so, this is going to be equal B181. So for example, we could take these and then drag down to row 60 or so. And what we would have, we'd have the first 180 names, oops, under row 60. Oops. So that's not too bad. So Michael Kirby should be at the top of the next list, right there. So we've got, so that's a possible way to build it. In other words, you're not really destroying the leftmost column there. You're writing formulas out here, and you can copy those formulas to themselves if you want to get rid of the formulas. So again, it's some techniques. If this is important to somebody, if you want to send me an email, you could do that. It's let me show you, give you my email here. It's DennisTaylor@msn.com.
Great, and we will send out your email at the end after we're done with the recording. So, by the way, I do just want to add something that several people have asked, whether we are recording this, and we are in fact recording this, and we'll let you know when it's been edited and it's up.
Are there other questions?
Well, I don't think so. We're getting a lot of great compliments. So thank you very much, Dennis. We've got a lot of great feedback, and we're very happy everyone has come and participated. And we hope to do this a lot more going forward and to do a variety of topics and subjects. Sorry about the interference on that. There's some construction going on outside my house. We are very excited. And we hope to see you again, and we'll let you know when our next course or webinar is going to happen. So thank you for joining us.